Hello and welcome to the Football for Kids podcast with me, Darren Rees. In this episode, we're going to be talking about a man who has been described as the greatest player to ever walk the earth. A legend that has recently passed and given so much to the footballing world. Of course, we're going to be talking about the incredible Pele. First of all, a quick birthday shout out before we get into the proper shout outs and messages to one of Football for Kids' most avid listeners. So a big happy birthday for the 27th of March to Heavenika. I hope you have a really good day and also you're enjoying your football still. The first shout out on this episode goes to Austin. Austin has fairly recently started listening to the podcast and listens when he's joining his mum on her runs. He's a huge football fan and plays for Cambridge United RDC. So a big shout out to everybody at Cambridge United RDC and of course to your brilliant coaches. Austin is also a huge Sheffield Wednesday supporter. Thank you for being a listener, Austin. I really appreciate you listening to the podcast and I hope that you enjoy this episode. And the next one is from Thomas. It says, "Hi Darren, my name is Thomas and I am 9 in March. I support Liverpool. My favourite episode so far was the one on Ronaldo, the R9 Ronaldo. Can you give my team a shout? They're called Vulcans Under 9s. Well, a big shout out to everybody in the team for Vulcans Under 9s and of course to your coaches who I'm sure do a brilliant job. He'd like me to do an episode on Willian. His favourite player is Cristiano Ronaldo. And he finishes his message with the biggest "Sue" I think I've ever been sent. And the final one on this episode says, "Hi Darren, I'm Josh. Please can I have a shout out for my team, Holton Hurricanes Under 8s, especially Jensen. I play in midfield and I'm a massive Tottenham fan. Please can you do a pod on Heung-min Son? Thanks for the great podcasts, from Josh." Well, thank you very much, Josh. I really appreciate you being a listener as well. A massive shout out to the Holton Hurricanes Under 8s. So hello and a big shout out to everybody in the team there and to your brilliant coaches as well. Right then, let's talk about the GOAT, shall we? The greatest of all time, Brazil's very own Pele. Pele was born all the way back in 1940 and his actual full name was Edson Arantes do Nascimento. Pele was born in Brazil, a place that he was very proud of. A place which he said brought him into the world. Where Pele grew up, it was beautiful. And he said that when he was younger, he didn't even know there were other countries. He just knew about Brazil. Pele's family didn't have a lot of money at all. He described his family as being very poor and not having a lot. His grandparents would deliver wood via horse and cart, and he had fond memories of riding on the cart. They were good times for Pele. Like many of the players that grew up to love and play the game, Pele's father was a footballer and had the nickname Don Dino. Pele was known when he was younger as Don Dino's son. Little did the people in those days know that he would go on to be one of the greatest players, if not the greatest player, to have ever lived. Pele looked up to his dad and was extremely inspired by him. He wanted to be like him. He thought his dad was the greatest player in the world. One of the things which we will talk about later is Pele's work ethic. One of the hardest workers in football. That work ethic was with Pele since he was a young child. When Pele was young, his dad got injured and he couldn't play football anymore, so he wasn't earning any money. Pele took it upon himself to go and earn some money for the house. He would go out onto the busy streets of Brazil and shine the shoes of people to earn any money that he could. Pele was always on the streets playing football, obsessed with the game. Every moment of every hour he could be playing, he would be playing. People would say it was like a ball was attached to his foot. And in 1953, when Pele was 13 years old, he started out at a Brazilian club called Bauru. Pele stayed at the club for around 3 years, developing his on-pitch experience and learning his craft. And in 1956, he went to a club called Santos. Santos are a team these days in the top Brazilian football division. And when Pele went there, one of the coaches remembers 2 things about him. Number 1, shaking Pele's hand, and for such a young man, he had the strongest handshake. And that made him think, I'd rather be on his team than against him. And the other thing which the coaches picked up on very quickly was how ridiculously skillful and talented he was. Pele was a fearless young player. He was confident and wasn't scared of barely anything. He had everything going for him. 2 years after joining Santos, Pele got the dream call. The call to play for his country. A huge deal for anyone, never mind a teenager. 8 years before this, Brazil hosted the World Cup, and Pele remembers listening on the radio and being completely fascinated. Brazil ended up losing the World Cup in the final to Uruguay, and the people of Brazil were devastated. Pele's dad was in tears, and Pele promised him, "Dad, one day I'll win a World Cup for you. I promise I'll do it." Well, the 1958 World Cup was to be held in Sweden, and Pele was on his way. The teenager hadn't even left Brazil before, and he was on his way to the World Cup in another continent. A huge moment for such a young man. Pele's dad kept telling him to believe in himself. Whatever you do, Pele, just believe in yourself. And that is exactly what he did. Brazil played Wales at the World Cup, and one of the Welsh players, Cliff Jones, picked up on how special Pele was within moments of seeing him play. And he wasn't wrong, because Pele ended up scoring a goal that won them the match. Brazil went on to play France in the semi-finals, and Pele scored a hat-trick. Brazil were through to the final. The final was to be held between the host Sweden and Brazil. Could Pele, a young lad who was listening on the radio 8 years before, win the World Cup and fulfill that promise to his dad? You bet he could. Pele and his teammates won the game 5-2, and Pele was responsible for 2 incredible goals. Brazil were world champions, and the entire country spilt out onto the streets, hugging and celebrating. The joy that football brings made an entire country very emotional. That brings episode 1 of the Football for Kids Pele story to an end. And remember, if you know somebody who loves football just as much as you, then please tell them about Football for Kids. And whether you're playing football soon, watching it on the telly or pitchside, I hope that you enjoy the game. See you next time.